What's up, cheese bags, and welcome into another very special episode of Trucking Up History presented by H&M Trucking. Today, we talk about the Big Dig. It sounds like a Bob the Builder episode title, but many of us remember it as one of the most expensive highway projects in the history of the United States that took forever to complete.
1 million, zillion, jillion, dillion, cotillion times later.
Boston, Beantown, the cradle of liberty is where our investigation takes us today. Was the Big Dig really necessary? Why was it so expensive? And are the cannolis in Boston actually that good? We'll answer all of those questions and more on this very special episode of Bob the Builder.
From Omaha, Nebraska, to whatever lane you're driving, this is the H&M Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
We have to go all the way back to 1630 to see when the town of Boston was first established. Puritan colonists moved on from Plymouth and found themselves in Salem. Yes, that's where the witch trials happened, and then in Boston. From this point on, Boston was a major player in the foundation of all of North America. It was actually the largest city in North America until the mid-18th century. So New York City can suck it. Well, not actually, but still kind of. But in 1613, it was a long time ago, obviously. Almost 150 years before America was even founded. Oh, and we all know about the Tea Party that happened in Boston. That happened way after Boston had been founded too. And the famous line, "The British are coming," was not to be heard until roughly 150 years after the city was founded. So if you ever think you're old, just imagine how Boston feels. But with age comes problems. Obviously, any motorized vehicles meant for roads didn't exist back in the 1630s, so horse-drawn carriages were all the rage. Yet, you still needed roads, or at least paths, to ride these on. So Bostonians started creating roads without a plan. Everyone and their grandma could create a road if they wanted to. Just making sure it goes somewhere was their only requirement. It was actually a legend that Bostonians laid out their streets based on cow grazing paths because there was absolutely no rhyme or reason to some of the roads. And if you've ever seen a map of Boston from the air, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about here. So fast forward 125 years or so after America was founded to when personal cars became a thing. What roads were you supposed to use then? Luckily, Boston had just started putting a road wherever they could and had a city planner around this time. However, there was a lot of work to dismiss that the early settlers had put in on their road system. I mean, Bostonians are tough people, so I sure as heck wouldn't have wanted to be the new guy to tell the old historians that their roads were pieces of junk. It should also be noted that Boston was originally a peninsula. This is basically an island with a little strip of land connecting it to a larger piece of land. What you see today on a map isn't a peninsula. That's because in the 1800s, Bostonians needed more land, but they had nowhere to expand to. If you didn't know, there was shallow water west of the city center that was considered a swamp. Maybe not a swamp like you see in Shrek, but nonetheless, a swamp all the same. So some clever individuals had the idea of filling in the swamp. Slowly but surely, it was filled with gravel, dirt, ashes, and anything Bostonians could get their hands on, like the Super Bowl title hopes of a Tom Brady-less Patriots team. It took almost all of the 1800s to complete this, as it was finished in 1890. By the way, it's still this today. Go to Fenway Park, dig down a lot, and you'll find that you're on a bunch of rubbish on top of a swamp, likely built on a lifetime of vitriol from Yankees fans. So this, on top of the complex roads the Puritans founded, made the 1900s a mess for anyone driving in Boston. Get your Model T out and go for a drive. You'd probably end up missing a turn or two without a detailed map. Fast forward 50 years, a semi-truck in the 1960s would have had to endure the tightest turns and most stressful lane changes to just deliver a load. Even with the development of concrete roads and city planning, the pace at which Boston grew produced a real challenge for the roads downtown and west of downtown that led us to the Big Dig. In the 1930s, city planners had already seen the writing on the wall. Boston was plagued with congestion where motorists would spend hours of their day in their vehicles. So in the 1930s, it was recommended that there was a raised expressway running north to south through downtown to draw through traffic off the streets. This is known as the Central Artery of Boston. This raised central artery was built, and by 1959, the 1.5-mile road section carried 75,000 vehicles per day. This increased to 190,000 vehicles per day by 1990. The elevated 6-lane highway sort of helped when it first opened, but more needed to be done to aid the growing population of Boston and its old historic roads. The people of Boston are already terrifying enough. Imagine what it's like when you put thousands of them on a congested roadway above the city where they are stuck for hours. Tight turns, many entrances and exits, and a few merging lanes made the raised central artery seem like hell to the citizens of Boston. It was also ugly because someone thought it would be a good idea to paint it the exact same color as Fenway's Green Monster. Luckily for Boston, the city which is consistently known for its education, some smart people came up with an idea. We talked about the failed elevated central artery, but there were other failed attempts to create roads that could clear up congestion as well. So something such as the Big Dig seemed as if it would fail too. Thankfully, 2 MIT engineers named Bill Reynolds and Frederick Salvucci had a vision and a plan to complete the Big Dig. With anything of this magnitude, pushback was inevitable. Many businesses in Boston would rather have seen a third harbor tunnel granting easier access to Logan International Airport instead of a Big Dig clearing up the traffic in main city Boston. Thanks to the smart fellows from MIT and the governor of Massachusetts, a project was developed to combine the two projects, making everyone happy. Planning for the Big Dig officially started in 1982, with environmental impact studies starting the year after. After years of extensive lobbying and finishing the environmental studies, Congress passed a public works bill that would help fund the Big Dig. But Ronald Reagan vetoed it for being too expensive. He really didn't give a damn if those in Beantown sat in traffic all day. Thankfully, Congress overrode the veto, giving the green light for construction to begin in 1991. Construction doesn't always go the way that you think it will. Even on Bob the Builder, the dude faces problems. The Big Dig faced enormous setbacks and problems. One of the largest problems included digging. You can't have the Big Dig without digging. Remember how we talked about how Boston was filled in? Yeah, so much of the area that needed to be dug was landfill. It also included the Red and Blue Line subway tunnels. And the area that was supposed to be dug had countless pipes and utility lines that would have to be moved or placed elsewhere. When digging began, construction workers also found unexpected geological and archaeological barriers such as glacier debris, foundations of buried houses, sunken ships, and the dreams of Red Sox fans hoping that one day they would be better than the Yankees. Speaking of the Yankees, there were millions of rats that lived in the underground of Boston. What happens when you disrupt their homes? The rats take to the streets in protest. You can count me out now. I'll take the traffic. If the rats don't scare you off, then the fact that the elevated highway that we talked about earlier lying directly above the Big Dig impact area should. Temporary pylons were needed to uphold the elevated central artery because construction workers needed to get into places where the original pylons had been. The temporary pylons did their job, luckily, yet it would have freaked me out to sit on that highway for an hour knowing that's what was holding me up. Another big problem was the fact that Boston isn't always the warmest place. That might come as a surprise to those of you far removed from the Northeast, but their winters are brutal. Hell, their fall and spring can sometimes be brutal too. Living in Boston is brutal. Digging into cold, frozen ground is definitely not as easy as digging into warm soil. However, this benefited the project in a way. Since the construction had to pass underneath train lines, it was incredibly important that the loose soil didn't shift or cave in. Frozen soil had a benefit, even though it was tougher and more time-consuming to dig into because it was less likely to lose its shape. So the winter might have been a plus for once in Boston, because during the summers, crews would have to use more ground-freezing techniques. This is where they use artificial inductions of permafrost to stabilize the soil. The good news is, construction still happened despite all of these setbacks. The Massachusetts Turnpike Authority managed the project, but due to the size of the project, they outsourced construction out to many different firms, such as Kiewit Corporation, J.F. White, Obayashi Corporation, and more. The Big Dig by numbers spanned 7.8 miles. It had 161 miles of lanes, was about half in tunnels, and had 3.8 million cubic yards of concrete. This is equal to 2,350 acres of concrete 1 foot thick. That's a lot of concrete for Bob the Builder to lay. What's crazier is that 16 million cubic yards of soil were excavated. Now, you might have caught me saying that only half of the Big Dig was in tunnels, so where was the rest? Above ground and on bridges is the answer to that question. Let's talk about the bridges involved for a second, because some were opposed to them. All of the moles wanted to keep their things underground, but bridges are a much easier way to cross bodies of water. The Massachusetts Turnpike Authority intended to create a bridge that would cross the Charles River against the wishes of those who wanted to keep things underground. They went ahead with starting to build the bridge, yet there were parts of the bridge that projected to have ramps 100 feet in the air based on the original design. The Smarty Pants in Cambridge, where Harvard is, sued to revoke the project's environmental certificate, therefore the bridge was redesigned. Boston brought in a Swiss designer to create a bridge that meant something to the city. So a bridge was designed that paid tribute to Bunker Hill and the importance that sailing played in Boston's history. The bridge was also named after civil rights activist Lenny Zakin. This bridge changed Boston's traffic and skyline forever and is still known today as the widest cable-stayed bridge in the world at 10 lanes. It was also the first bridge of its kind in the US that used both steel and concrete in its frame. Now you can find those bridges all over the United States. So construction on the bridge, roads, and tunnels took place. Overall, it took from 1991 to 2006 for everything to be completed. However, bits and pieces, like the bridge in 2003, opened up once completed and connected. There were ribbon cuttings and events put in place to celebrate the massive project that the city of Boston went through. We all know construction tends to cause more delays, so when this 15-year-long project finally came to an end, Bostonians celebrated. Unfortunately, there seemed to be a few problems. Given that Boston is a swamp like we mentioned earlier, and there are parts of the Big Dig that go underground, leaks were a problem. What's bad though is that people who knew that leaks would be a problem didn't say anything. Many of the leaks formed because contractors were lazy and didn't remove gravel or other debris before pouring concrete on top of it. People knew about this all the way back in 2001, but it wasn't made public until MIT engineers performed experiments confirming what the higher-ups already knew. In 2004, this problem was aggravated by the fact that there was a major leak in the I-93 North Tunnel that forced its closure. It was estimated that after this, the Big Dig was riddled with more than 400 leaks. Some, like the Boston Globe, estimated that there were as many as 1,000 major leaks. Isn't that nice? Just what you want to hear as a Boston commuter. The leaks tended to be aggravated by the fact that many of them involved salt water and fresh water mixing together. Plus, road salt used in the winter was shown to corrode the walls and ceilings of the Big Dig. In 2006, a 26-ton panel fell on a vehicle in one of the tunnels. The passenger in the vehicle was killed, causing a stern safety audit ordered by Governor Mitt Romney. Yes, that's the same Mitt Romney who ran for president. So the tunnel in which this happened was closed down. This led to more traffic once again, which caused another person to die and a heart attack patient to die on their way to the hospital. There truly wasn't a winnable situation for Boston. At least they had Tom Brady by this point. Believe it or not, the panels on the roof of the tunnels were attached by glue. Glue. And it was found in 2007 by the National Transportation Safety Board that the glue which was used was faulty. Someone get them some Elmer's instead of the Great Value brand next time. Hell, even try Gorilla Glue. In 2012, it appeared that the light fixtures were literally falling from the sky, causing a replacement of nearly $54 million of light fixtures in the following years and more closings. While the Big Dig seemingly cleared up the congestion problems, it also delivered many problems of its own. Yet the impact that the Big Dig has had on not only Boston, but an incredibly important sector of the Northeast has had more positives than these negatives. While it was a long process to get to this point, one who drives in Boston today should be grateful for what they have. It's easy to access the airport, downtown, I-90, which begins at the Boston airport, I-93, and more. It also has made Boston a much prettier place with the roads underground instead of in the sky. Let's talk numbers though. How expensive was this thing? It's estimated that the Big Dig ran roughly $24.3 billion. That's pocket change. This makes it the 9th most expensive construction project in the world ever. For perspective, On this list sits the entirety of the interstate system and the International Space Station. At the peak of the construction, it was thought that $3 million of work was conducted by over 5,000 construction workers every single day. And these workers came from all over, as there were 118 separate construction contracts. On a positive note, the city's carbon monoxide levels dropped by an estimated 12% once the big dig was completed. That's an unbelievable amount. Part of this is also due to the fact that the parks and green spaces have been built where the roads once were. More than 45 public parks and plazas have been built over the big dig all over downtown Boston. Plus, the waterfront is much more accessible now for all Boston residents, including, and not limited to, the rats. You also need to know the most important stat, which involves traffic. Before the big dig, it was estimated that motorists spent 38,200 hours per day in the areas that went under construction. In 2005, that number dropped to 14,800 hours per day. This savings in time was put to a dollar value because everyone loves money. Travelers in total estimated $166 million in savings per year from not having to sit in traffic. Luckily, the Cradle of Liberty is in good hands now because of the big dig. Obviously, traffic still exists and there are crazy drivers up in the Northeast, but at least it's not as bad as it once was. It now ranks as number 2 for the worst traffic cities instead of number 1. Boston has some work to do still, but hey, at least they aren't Chicago. Thanks everybody for tuning in to our special episode of Trucking Up History, The Big Dig, presented by H&M Trucking. I've been your host, Marcus Bridges. We appreciate all the interaction with the podcast. Like, subscribe, and make sure to share it with your friends. And as always, stay fresh, cheese bags.
Thank you for listening to the H&M Trucking Podcast. Please leave a review, subscribe, and connect with Marcus over at the H&M Trucking social media channels. And if you're considering a job at H&M, find us at hmtrucking.com. Until next time, stay safe and ahead of the curve drivers.